first slide, it mentions the salivary glands. It lists 3 types, but we only really have to know one type. And this is the one type, and it's the first one on your list, which is a parotid salivary gland. Parotid are kind of in your cheeks, and they produce serous fluid, which is kind of liquidy, kind of real watery. And that is why it stains purple, because the serous fluid stains purple in color. The submandibular, just kind of think of the name sub, below, right? Mandibular, kind of like mandible, so it's kind of down along the jaw, just below. And then sublingual, what do you think where those are located? Sublingual, like lingual, if you're a linguist, that means you can speak many languages. So that relates to tongue. So sublingual are your tongue. Now the submandibular and sublingual contain more mucus producing tissues. So they stain more like a pink rather than a dark purple. And I'll show you what I mean by just let you see the color. But it's very hard to differentiate. So this is parotid. This is the only one you have to identify. So if I ask you to identify this on the test, you don't have to know any specific parts, but you'd want to tell me it's a salivary gland. Number 1, specifically it's a parotid salivary gland. Okay. It's connective tissues, smooth muscle, and sublingual and submandibular are very hard to differentiate from each other. So you just kind of leave them off. You don't have to know them. But you can see it's more pink, and that's because these submandibular and sublingual produce mucus, and that's pink growth. But like I said, all you'll be responsible for is purple, which is purple. Okay. So those are a little brief discussion of the salivary glands. And next, we have listed the gastroesophageal junction. So what does that sound like? What 2 things meet up there? Stomach and the esophagus, right? Now, the thing is that your stomach and your esophagus are lined with totally different tissue types. And lining, here we go, the inside of your esophagus is stratified squamous epithelium. And lining the inside of your stomach, what do you think that one is? That one is simple columnar. So let me blow it up real big here, so you can see. Sadly, there's sort of a fold where this switch, but that makes it pretty easy to spot what they call the transition zone. So off on the left side here, you can see this big layer, this thick layer, that's the stratified squamous epithelium, and that's beneath the esophagus. Okay. And then right in here, you can see this sort of little white zone. That's the transition zone. That's where we're getting that separation between the esophagus and the stomach. Now down here, we have simple columnar. Okay. And that's the line of your stomach. There are actually these big folds in the inside of the stomach. So right here where they connect again, it's just sort of folded over. So that kind of touch like this. A little pocket right here. Right here, all along here would be the stomach. All along here, so for this one, this would be a very easy one for me to point at one or the other and ask you the tissue type. And based on the tissue type, you should be able to tell me the organ, right? If it's the pointer's on stratified squamous epithelium, you're going to know it's esophagus. If it's on simple columnar, that's going to be the stomach. I usually don't put it on the transition zone just simply because it's, you know how that corner is. There's a little bit of give in it. So it'd be hard to tell if I was being tricky and trying to put it here or here or if it was right here. So I never really ask you to identify the transition zone on histology. Okay. Now, next one we have on our list are the 3 parts of the small intestine. So, the small intestine is pretty lengthy, right? It has a lot of different functions depending on where you are on the length of the small intestine. So the first part of intestine, that's where food is entering from the stomach, right? And what can you tell me about the contents of the stomach? It's really, in terms of pH, it's really what? It's acidic, right? Because of hydrochloric acid. So the first part of your small intestine has adaptations to deal with this. Okay. So, but first of all, let's look at like the general layers of the small intestine. And of those, we have, okay, we have the layer that goes more toward the inside of the lumen of the intestine, where the food is actually going to pass it through. And it's all this stuff here. And that is the mucosa, or the mucosal layer. Okay? So, oh, sorry. That was a little clumsy this thing. So, all of this stuff right here. Okay. And these little sort of projections that come out are called plica, or plica circularis. Now, that's also one of those things, it's like like on the brain. If I stick it in a particular part, oh, am I talking about a gyrus? Am I talking about the lobe? Am I talking about the functional area? I'm not going to ask you to identify the plica, because, I mean, I can point it here, and do I mean mucosa, or do I mean plica? I'll only ask you for the layer here. So, just plica, knowing plica circularis is good for, just for your own reference. Maybe we'll talk about it more in lecture if we haven't already. But for us, just that's the identify it. So mucosal layer, then as you go down below, you get this kind of lighter colored area with a lot of connective, this dense regular connective tissue. And this layer here is called the submucosa. So it's below the mucosa, it's called the submucosa. Now, this is where you can kind of differentiate between the three different types, or three different parts of the small intestine, depending on what's in the submucosa or submucosa layer. Okay. Now, in the case of the duodenum, the first part of the small intestine, like I said, it's coming, the chyme that's entering it is coming directly from the stomach, so it's really acidic. So in the duodenum, you can see these clusters right here. They look like little, like if you've ever had like, when you're a kid, you take a bubble bath and you could scoop up a big handful of like the little small bubbles. That's kind of what I see these looking like. Pull it up a little bit more. You can see pretty well right here. They look like sort of little clusters of bubbles. These right here are called the Brunner's glands. Like I said, you only find them in the submucosa of the duodenum. And they produce an alkaline substance that's released into the chyme as it enters the duodenum to help, make the pH less acidic. So you're not singeing the inside of the small intestine. So these are the Brunner's glands. If you see these in the submucosa, you know it's a duodenum. So on the test, when we do histology, you can't just tell me small intestine. You're going to have to tell me specifically what part it is. Duodenum, jejunum, or open. Okay, but I'm going to let you know how to know those. Okay. Now if we go out a little farther, those are Brunner's glands. They list it, if you go a little bit down on number 4, it says Brunner's glands, and it tells you about the submucosa of the duodenum and what they do. Okay. So you can see this layer right here. And then there's a slightly darker pink layer right here. But right here, you can see the line separating the two a little bit. This is the muscularis externa. And what this does is it's responsible for peristalsis. It's responsible for that wave-like movement that moves the chyme through the small intestines. And then this dark pink layer, that little small one right there, is the serosa layer. It also produces a serous fluid. And this serosa layer, if you've ever had sausage or boudin with a natural casing, usually that's one of the contributors, is that serosa layer, along with the visceral peritoneum sometimes.
What does it produce?
This produces a serous fluid to help lubricate all the organs in the abdomen, because your small intestine is actually contracting, right? It's like moving a little bit. So you have that fluid to help reduce friction. And also just keep everything moist. Alright, so all 3 types of the small intestine are going to have a mucosal layer, a submucosal layer, muscularis externa, and the serosal layer. What sets them apart, like I mentioned, is what you have in the submucosa. So in the duodenum, you have the Werner's glands, but I'm going to pan over here to look at our next part of the small intestine. Right? And this right here is the jejunum. So we still have the mucosal layer, the submucosa, the muscularis externa, and this, it's really thin here, but the dark pink of the serosal layer. But what do you notice about this submucosa? Do you see anything distinctive in it? Not really, right? You can't really see any sort of glands or other types of, mixed tissues. It's just sort of this layer that's really nondescript. So with the jejunum, this middle part of the small intestine, it's really not doing any sort of special job. It's just responsible for some absorption of nutrients, right? Like all the small intestine is. So you don't need to see anything specialized in the submucosa and the jejunum. So I'll show you one that's got nothing in the submucosa, then you're going to assume it. Last one is the ileum. And once again, you have the same four layers. You're going to have mucosa. This whole thing right here is submucosa, which obviously you can see these big things here. I'm going to talk about those in a second. Muscularis externa, and I can pan out a little bit more to find the serosal layer. But before I do that, I want to talk about these big, huge, grainy, dark purple patches. Okay. And this is what makes the ileum stand out. And these grainy purple patches here are called Peyer's patches. And that's number 5 on your sheet. Now, Peyer's patches are aggregates of lymphoid tissues. Okay, so they stain this dark purple. So they're responsible for, what do you think of when you think of lymphoid? Immune system, right? So your ileum is the last part of your small intestine right before the cecum, the first part of the large intestine. So bacteria, you've got the ileocecal valve separating the small and large intestine, right? But still, you get bacteria that moves from the large intestine into the small intestine. And these Peyer's patches in the ileum are responsible for helping prevent infection from those bacteria moving into the small intestine. So they're really important in immune function. So you've heard of like the malt and galt system of immune. These are important in that malt system.
Can you do the first one again?
Yeah, I'll scroll through them one more time. Okay. So I'll go all the way up, all the way to the edge. So you can see the source of what we're here in the dark. Okay. So this would be the ileum with the Peyer's patches and the submucosa. This would be the jejunum with nothing special in the submucosa. You can see it's pretty much clear. And then, last but not least, the duodenum with the Werner's glands. Okay. So those would be the small intestine portions. Next, we're going to go ahead and look at the liver. We have a couple of parts we have to know